Have you ever had the uncomfortable feeling that people around you might be pulling away? Perhaps your adult children don't call as often as they used to. Maybe your grandchildren seem distracted when you're talking, or friends you've known for years have become harder to reach. If you're experiencing this after 60, I want you to know something important right away. You are not imagining it and you are not alone, but here's the good news. The distance you're feeling usually isn't about who you are as a person. It's about specific habits that have quietly crept into how you interact with others. As we enter our 60s, 70s, and beyond, life gives us so much wisdom and experience. We've raised families, built careers, survived hardships, and learned countless lessons. But sometimes, without realizing it, these very experiences can harden into patterns that push people away rather than drawing them closer. The beautiful truth is that these patterns can be changed at any age. Your relationships can be restored. The warmth and connection you're missing can come flooding back into your life. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how. We're going to explore 5 specific behaviors that many seniors fall into without even recognizing it. These aren't about being a bad person. They're about unconscious habits that develop over decades of living. By the end of our time together, you'll understand why these behaviors create distance, how they affect the people you love most, and most importantly, what simple changes you can make starting today to bring people back into your circle. I want you to stay with me all the way through because the 5th behavior is the most damaging one. Yet it's also the easiest to fix once you understand it. Let's begin with the first habit that quietly pushes your loved ones away: constant negativity and complaining. Now, I need to acknowledge something right from the start. You have earned the right to complain. After 60, 70, 80 years of living, you've dealt with real hardships. Your body doesn't work the way it used to. You've lost people you love. The world has changed in ways that might frustrate or confuse you. All of this is legitimate, and your feelings about it are valid. But here's what I've observed working with seniors for many years. There's a profound difference between occasionally expressing frustration and making negativity your default mode of communication. Let me paint a picture you might recognize. You call your daughter to catch up. Within the first minute, you're talking about your arthritis pain. Then you mention how rude the cashier was at the grocery store. Then you bring up something you saw on the news that upset you. Then you complain about your neighbor's noisy dog. Before you know it, 15 minutes have passed, and the entire conversation has been a recitation of everything that's wrong. Your daughter says she has to go, and you hang up feeling a little empty, wondering why these calls don't feel as warm as they used to. Here's what's happening on the other end of that phone call. Your daughter loves you deeply. She wants to connect with you. But every time you talk, she feels like she's absorbing all your negativity and frustration without being able to help or fix anything. After months or years of this pattern, something shifts. She starts letting your calls go to voicemail more often. She keeps conversations shorter. She doesn't share as much of her own life because she knows the conversation will circle back to your complaints. This isn't because she doesn't love you, it's because she's protecting her own emotional energy. The psychology behind this is fascinating. As we age, our brains naturally develop something called a negativity bias. We notice and remember negative experiences more than positive ones. This actually made sense for our ancestors because paying attention to dangers kept them alive. But in modern relationships, especially in our senior years, this bias can become a trap. The more we focus on what's wrong, the more our brains get trained to see problems everywhere. It becomes an automatic lens through which we view everything. And here's the ripple effect that many seniors don't realize. Negativity is emotionally contagious. When you walk into a family gathering carrying a cloud of complaints, that mood spreads. Even if people don't consciously recognize it, they feel heavier after being around you. Your grandchildren might not want to sit with you at dinner because they've learned that being near you means hearing about aches, pains, and problems. Your friends might stop inviting you to lunch because the last 3 times, you spent the entire meal criticizing the restaurant, the service, and everyone around you. Now, I want to be very clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not suggesting you pretend everything is perfect. I'm not asking you to put on a fake smile and act like you do and have real concerns. That kind of false positivity is just as damaging as constant negativity. What I'm talking about is balance. It's the ability to acknowledge difficulty while also recognizing and expressing gratitude for what is still good in your life. It's choosing to share the full picture, not just the dark parts. Let me give you a concrete example of how this sounds different. Old pattern. You're having coffee with a friend and they ask how you're doing. You respond, "Terrible, my knee is killing me. The doctor says there's nothing more they can do. I can barely sleep at night." Getting old is just one problem after another. "I don't know why I even bother." Your friend nods sympathetically, but inside they're feeling drained. They don't know what to say. The conversation feels heavy and stuck. Now listen to the balanced approach. Same situation, same knee pain, but different framing. "You know, my knee has been giving me trouble, and that's been challenging. But I've been doing these gentle exercises my physical therapist taught me, and I think they're helping a little. And even on the tough days, I'm grateful I can still get outside and work in my garden. Yesterday I saw the most beautiful cardinal. Do you hear the difference? You've acknowledged the real problem. You've been honest about the struggle. But you've also offered hope, solution-seeking, and gratitude. Your friend can respond with encouragement. They can ask about your garden. The conversation can move forward into connection rather than sitting in heaviness. This shift requires daily practice, but it's simpler than you might think. Every morning, before you even get out of bed, identify 3 things you're grateful for. They can be tiny. The softness of your pillow, the fact that you slept through the night, the birds singing outside your window, the cup of coffee you're about to have. Train your brain to notice these small goods. Then, when you interact with people during the day, practice leading with one of these positives before mentioning any difficulties. When your son calls and asks how you are, instead of immediately listing your problems, start with something good. "I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I had a lovely walk this morning and ran into Mrs. Peterson from church. We had a nice chat." Then if you need to mention something difficult, you add it. "My back has been bothering me a bit, but I'm managing." This simple reordering of information completely transforms how people experience talking to you. You've led with light, and that makes all the difference. I've seen this transformation happen with countless seniors. One woman I worked with, Margaret, was 74 and couldn't understand why her 3 adult children rarely visited. When we examined her conversation patterns, she realized that 90% of what she talked about was negative. Her health problems, her complaints about the retirement community, her criticisms of how her children were raising their kids. We worked on shifting her focus. She started keeping a daily gratitude journal. She practiced leading conversations with positive observations. Within 3 months, her children were calling more, visiting longer, and bringing the grandchildren over regularly. They told her, "Mom, you seem so much happier lately. It's wonderful to be around you." Have you ever noticed that as we get older, some friendships seem to fade away? Sometimes it's just life, but other times we might be unintentionally pushing people away. It's a tough thought, but a really important one to consider, especially for those of us over 60. We've gathered a lifetime of experiences, stories, and opinions, and that's fantastic. But how we share them can make all the difference between connecting with others and creating distance. Today, we're going to dive deep into 2 common behaviors that can strain our relationships and, more importantly, explore how to shift them to build stronger, more meaningful connections. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding and growth, because our relationships are one of the most precious things we have at any age. Let's start with the first behavior, dominating conversations. You know the scene. You're catching up with a friend, they start to tell you about their recent trip, and before they can even finish their first sentence, you jump in. "Oh, you went to Italy? I went there back in '98. We visited Rome, Florence, Venice. The pasta was incredible, but let me tell you, the crowds were something else. We found this little trattoria off the beaten path." And just like that, the conversation is no longer about their trip. It's about yours. It's a classic conversation takeover. Or maybe your son mentions he's struggling with a new project at work. Your immediate response? "Well, in my day, we had to manage projects without any of this fancy software. Here's what you need to do." You launch into a 10-minute lecture, offering unsolicited advice based on your own career, completely bypassing his feelings of stress and frustration. These examples might sound familiar, and they often come from a good place. We want to relate, to share our wisdom, to help. We're proud of our experiences and believe they can be valuable to others. The psychological drive behind this is often a desire to feel seen, respected, and valued. After retirement, for example, we might miss the sense of authority and expertise we had in our professional lives. So we try to recreate that feeling in our personal conversations. The problem is, it backfires. When we constantly dominate the conversation, we're sending a subtle message. My story is more interesting than yours. My experience is more valid. My feelings matter more. The other person feels unheard, dismissed, and unimportant. They might start to think, what's the point of sharing anything if it's just going to become about them? Over time, they'll stop trying. They'll call less, share less, and slowly the connection will weaken. It turns a potential dialogue into a monologue. So how do we fix this? How do we share our rich life experiences without steamrolling the people we care about? The key is to become a better listener. A powerful technique to practice is the 70-30 rule. Aim to listen 70% of the time and talk only 30% of the time. This forces you to be more intentional. When someone is speaking, your primary job is not to think about what you're going to say next. It's to listen, truly listen. Ask open-ended questions that encourage them to share more. Instead of saying, oh, Italy, I went there too. Try, wow, Italy, what was your favorite part of the trip? Instead of launching into advice for your son, you could say, that sounds really tough. What's the biggest challenge you're facing with it? This small shift is transformative. It validates their experience and makes them feel heard and respected. It shows that you're interested in them, not just in finding an opportunity to talk about yourself. You can still share your stories, but wait for the right moment. Wait until they've finished, or better yet, wait until they ask you. Have you ever been there? Or what would you do? When the invitation is there, your story becomes a gift, not a lecture. Now let's move on to the second, equally damaging behavior, dismissing others' feelings. This one can be more subtle, but just as hurtful. Imagine your daughter calls you upset because she had a disagreement with her husband. Your response is, oh honey, don't be so dramatic, all couples argue. You'll get over it. Or a friend confides that they're feeling lonely and isolated. You reply, lonely? You shouldn't feel lonely. You have a wonderful family. Just be more positive. In both cases, the intention might be to make them feel better, to offer perspective, or to fix the problem. But the effect is the exact opposite. You're invalidating their emotions. You're telling them that their feelings are wrong, exaggerated, or unjustified. This is incredibly alienating. People, especially our adult children and close friends, aren't always looking for a solution when they share their struggles. Often, they're just looking for empathy. They want someone to sit with them in their feelings, to say, that sounds really hard, or I'm so sorry you're going through that. The psychology here is often rooted in our own discomfort with negative emotions. Perhaps we were raised to believe that complaining is a sign of weakness, or that we should always look on the bright side. So when someone we love expresses sadness, anxiety, or anger, our own internal alarm bells go off, and we rush to shut down the negativity. We want to restore harmony and happiness as quickly as possible, but feelings aren't problems to be solved. They're experiences to be shared. When we dismiss someone's emotions, we create a barrier. They learn that we are not a safe person to be vulnerable with. They'll start hiding their true feelings from us to avoid being judged or dismissed. This is especially true with younger generations, who are often more encouraged to be open about their mental and emotional health. If they perceive us as someone who will just tell them to toughen up, they'll seek support elsewhere. The alternative approach is to practice validation. Validation doesn't mean you have to agree with their perspective or even think their emotional reaction is proportional to the situation. It simply means you accept their feelings as real and valid for them in that moment. It's about empathy. So when your daughter calls upset about an argument, try saying, that sounds so frustrating. It's really hard when you two aren't on the same page. I'm here to listen if you want to talk about it. When your friend expresses loneliness, a validating response would be, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. Loneliness is a really tough feeling. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. See the difference? You're not trying to fix anything. You're not passing judgment, you're simply offering a safe space. You're communicating, your feelings are safe with me. This simple act of validation builds immense trust and deepens intimacy. It shows that you love and accept them for who they are, feelings and all. It strengthens your bond in a way that giving advice never could. Bringing it all together. These two behaviors, dominating conversations and dismissing feelings, both stem from a similar place. Focusing too much on our own perspective and not enough on the other person. The antidote, in both cases, is a conscious shift toward curiosity and empathy. It's about moving from "let me tell you" to "tell me more." It's about trading judgment for validation. This isn't always easy. These are often deeply ingrained habits we've developed over decades. It requires self-awareness and practice. You might catch yourself starting to interrupt and have to consciously stop. You might have the urge to say "do and worry" and have to bite your tongue and offer empathy instead. That's okay. The effort itself is what matters. Start small. Pick one relationship you want to improve. The next time you talk to that person, set an intention. Today, I will practice the 70-30 rule, or today I will focus on validating their feelings. Pay attention to how the conversation feels. Notice their reaction. Do they seem more relaxed? Do they share more openly? The positive feedback you get will motivate you to keep going. Building and maintaining strong, healthy relationships is one of the most rewarding endeavors of our lives, especially in our later years. It keeps us connected, vibrant, and supported. By being mindful of how we communicate, we can ensure our relationships don't just survive, but thrive for years to come. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope you found these insights helpful. If this resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content on living our best lives at any age. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever caught yourself doing this or been on the receiving end? Let's continue the conversation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. The alternative is something called emotional validation, and it's one of the most powerful gifts you can give to the people in your life. Emotional validation means acknowledging and accepting another person's feelings without judgment, without comparison, and without immediately trying to fix them. It sounds like this. That sounds really difficult. I can understand why you'd feel that way. Tell me more about what you're going through. Notice what you're not doing. You're not comparing their problem to yours. You're not telling them they shouldn't feel that way. You're not immediately jumping to solutions. You're simply creating space for their emotion to exist and be acknowledged. This is what builds trust and intimacy. This is what makes people want to open up to you rather than shutting down. Let me give you a specific example. Your adult daughter calls you crying because she had a fight with her husband. The dismissive response sounds like, "Oh, all couples fight. Your father and I used to argue all the time. You'll get over it." Don't make such a big deal out of nothing. The validating response sounds like, "I hear how upset you are. That must be really hard. Do you want to talk about what happened?" The first response shuts her down. The second opens her up. The first teaches her not to come to you with problems. The second strengthens your bond. This doesn't mean you can never share your own experiences or offer perspective. Of course you can, but the key is sequence and balance. Listen first. Validate their feelings. Ask questions to understand more deeply. Only then, after they feel genuinely heard, might you gently offer perspective or share a similar experience. And even then, you frame it as offering, not correcting. Would it help if I shared what worked for me in a similar situation? This gives them the choice rather than forcing your wisdom on them. The fourth behavior that drives people away is one that many seniors do and even realize they're redoing. Talking negatively about others, gossiping, and criticizing people behind their backs. This habit is particularly destructive because it doesn't just affect the person you're talking about. It affects everyone who hears you do it. When you speak poorly about your neighbor to your son, he's not just hearing information about the neighbor. He's learning about your character. He's thinking, consciously or unconsciously, if mom talks about the neighbor this way, she probably talks about me this way too. This pattern often intensifies after retirement. When you're no longer working, when your social circle has shrunk, when you have more time to notice what's happening around you, It can be tempting to fill conversation with observations and judgments about other people. You might talk about how your neighbor doesn't take care of their yard, how your friend from church made a foolish financial decision, how your daughter-in-law is raising your grandchildren all wrong. You might think this is just making conversation or sharing observations, but what you're actually doing is creating an atmosphere of judgment and mistrust. Here's the psychological impact. When you consistently speak negatively about others, people become guarded around you. They start wondering what you say about them when they're not present. They become careful about what they share, knowing it might become fodder for your next gossip session. Instead of feeling close to you, they feel distant and protective. They keep things surface level because depth requires trust, and trust requires knowing that someone won't use your vulnerabilities as entertainment. There's also what gossip does to your own mindset. When you spend mental and emotional energy focusing on other people's flaws and failures, your brain starts looking for imperfections everywhere. You train yourself to notice what's wrong with people rather than what's right. This doesn't just affect how you see others, it affects your overall outlook on life. You become more negative, more critical, more difficult to please. And that internal shift shows up in all your relationships. The alternative is to practice what I call generous speech. This means choosing to speak about others with kindness and charity even when they're not around. When you're tempted to criticize someone, pause and ask yourself, is this true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? If it doesn't meet all three criteria, don't say it. Instead, look for opportunities to compliment people sincerely, to notice their strengths, to give them the benefit of the doubt. For example, your neighbor does something that annoys you. The old pattern would be to call your friend and complain about them for 20 minutes. The new pattern is to either say nothing or, if you must mention it, frame it neutrally. My neighbor made a choice I wouldn't have made, but I'm sure they have their reasons. Or even better, actively look for something positive to say about that neighbor. You know, even though we're different, I appreciate that they always wave when they see me. This shift has a profound effect. When people know you won't speak badly about them, they feel safe with you. They open up more. They trust you with deeper parts of themselves. And interestingly, when you stop gossiping, you often find that the relationships you do have become richer and more meaningful. Quality over quantity becomes your reality. Finally, we come to the fifth and most destructive behavior. And this is the one I see destroying relationships between seniors and their families more than any other. It's acting superior, refusing to admit mistakes, and always insisting you're right. After 60, 70, 80 years of living, it's natural to feel like you've learned a lot. You have wisdom. You have experience. You've made it through situations your children and grandchildren haven't faced yet. But when that knowledge hardens into an attitude of superiority, when you become unable to say I was wrong or I do no or you might be right, you create an enormous wall between yourself and everyone else. Here's what this looks like in practice. Your son makes a parenting decision you disagree with. Instead of asking about his reasoning or offering your perspective gently, you tell him he's wrong. You insist your way is the only way. You bring up how you raised him, implying that your methods are superior. Your son tries to explain his thinking, but you interrupt to correct him. The conversation ends with tension. Your son leaves feeling disrespected and controlled. Over time, he stops asking for your input. He stops sharing his parenting struggles. He creates distance to protect his autonomy and dignity. Or imagine this. You make a factual mistake in conversation. Someone gently corrects you. Instead of simply saying, "Oh, you're right, I was mistaken," you argue. You insist you're correct. You become defensive. Even when presented with clear evidence, you can't bring yourself to admit the error. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, you've come to believe that being right is essential to being respected. But the opposite is true. The inability to admit mistakes doesn't make you look strong. It makes you look rigid, insecure, and difficult. This pattern is particularly harmful with adult children. They've grown up, they've developed their own wisdom and judgment. They need you to respect them as equals, not treat them as children who need constant correction. When you position yourself as always, knowing better, always being right, always having the final word, you're denying them their adulthood. You're saying implicitly that they haven't earned your respect as capable adults. and they respond by pulling away. The most beautiful thing about humility is that it actually increases respect rather than decreasing it. When you can say, "I was wrong about that," people admire your honesty and strength. When you can say, "I don't know, what do you think?" you invite collaboration and connection. When you can say, "You might be right, I hadn't thought of it that way," you show that you're still growing, still learning, still open. These phrases don't weaken you. They transform you into someone people want to be around. Let me share a story. I worked with a man named Frank who was 82. His relationship with his daughter had become so strained that she barely visited. Through our conversations, Frank realized he had spent decades correcting her, lecturing her, and refusing to acknowledge when he was wrong. We practiced humility exercises. The next time his daughter visited, when she mentioned a decision she'd made, instead of immediately telling her why it was wrong, Frank said, "That's interesting. I hadn't thought of approaching it that way. Tell me more about your reasoning." His daughter was shocked. For the first time in years, she felt respected by her father. That one conversation opened the door to rebuilding their relationship. As we conclude our time together today, I want you to reflect on these 5 behaviors. Constant negativity, dominating conversations, dismissing feelings, gossiping about others, and refusing to admit mistakes. If you recognized yourself in any of these patterns, please don't feel ashamed. These are common habits, especially as we age, but they can be changed. Starting today, you can choose positivity over complaint. You can choose listening over talking. You can choose validation over dismissal. You can choose kindness over criticism. And you can choose humility over pride. These changes won't happen overnight, but every small step matters. Every time you catch yourself complaining and shift to gratitude instead, you're building a new pattern. Every time you ask a question instead of telling a story, you're strengthening connection. Every time you validate someone's feelings instead of minimizing them, you're building trust. Your relationships can be restored. The warmth you're missing can return. It starts with awareness and it continues with daily practice. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'd love to hear which of these behaviors you recognized in yourself and what specific change you were going to make. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your insights might help another senior who's struggling with the same patterns. And if this video helped you, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with any seniors in your life who might benefit. Together we can build stronger, warmer, more connected relationships in our golden years. Until next time, choose kindness, practice humility, and keep growing.